The President. Questions. Questions 1. Dr. Tik Chi-yuen. President, the Chief Executive has put forth in the 2022 policy address a number of initiatives to strive to improve the governance of the government, which include strengthening the reward and punishment system for civil servants and setting key performance indicators or KPIs for specified tasks. The Chief Executive has pointed out that for officers whose performance remains persistently substandard, despite supervision and assistance, their appointment should be terminated in a timely manner. In this connection, will the government inform this Council, 1. Whether the aforesaid reward and punishment system is also applicable to politically appointed officials or PAOs? If so, of the details. If not, whether it will establish a reward and punishment system which is applicable to PAOs. And 2. Whether the government will assess the performance of secretaries of departments and directors of bureaus against the achievements of KPIs and provide this Council and the public with regular updates on the achievements of such KPIs so that members of the public can monitor the performance of them. Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs. President, the accountability system for principal officials of the Hong Kong SAR was introduced on the 1st of July 2022. The objectives of its establishment include 1. To enhance the accountability of principal officials for their respective policy portfolios. 2. To maintain a permanent, professional and meritocratic civil service. 3. To select the most suitable persons to take up the principal official positions to serve the community and to enhance governance. 4. To better coordinate the formulation of policies to ensure their effective implementation and provision of quality services to the public. 5. To enhance cooperation between the executive and the legislature. And 6. To enable senior government officials to better appreciate the aspirations of the community and better respond to the needs of the community. In accordance with the basic law of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China, principal officials of the HKSAR are nominated by the CE and appointed by the Central People's Government. Under this system, the team of principal officials and the CE, of one heart and one mind, and dedicated to their duties, work collectively to safeguard the national sovereignty, security, development interests of the country, and maintain the prosperity and stability of Hong Kong. They have to proactively address public demands, ensure that their policies meet public expectations, and are in the long-term interests of the country and Hong Kong. In consultation with the relevant office and policy bureau, my consolidated reply to the question raised by Dr. Tik Chi-yuen is as follows. The Chief Executive values team spirit. He believes that governance capability of the government relies on the concerted efforts of leaders and team members. The two must act closely with one another in order to achieve the synergy effect of 1 + 1 is greater than 2. Create the greatest value and allow our people to benefit most. In fact, politically appointed officials and civil servants must work hand in hand as they are shouldering the expectation and obligation of good governance of the Hong Kong SAR. In the policy address, the Chief Executive has undertaken to enhance the overall governance capability and efficacy, improve the governance system of the Hong Kong SAR, and enhance the governance capability and efficacy of the governing team and the civil service. As the principal officials of the political team in charge of different policy areas, they should gauge the pulse of the community and fully consider opinions from all walks of life so as to formulate appropriate policies. Furthermore, they must also assume responsibility of the policy outcomes and be ultimately held accountable to the CE. Under the existing mechanism, the principal accountability officials are bound by the Code for officials under the Political Appointment System, or the PAO Code. The Code has clearly stated that PAOs shall be dedicated to their duties and be responsible to the Hong Kong SAR government, and shall act in the best interests of Hong Kong SAR as a whole. In the event of any allegations of breach of duty, all the provisions set out in the PAO Code, The CE, after due process, will decide whether the alleged breach is established, and if so, the applicable sanctions, including warning, public reprimand, suspension, or dismissal. In the case of principal officials, the Chief Executive may, if considered appropriate, make recommendation to the Central People's Government for the suspension or dismissal as per the Basic Law. We consider the current mechanism effective. Under the political appointment system, civil servants may focus on assisting the CE and PAOs in making and implementing policies, as well as managing public services under their respective portfolios. The CE has raised in the policy address that the government will strengthen the civil service management system, including launching a new reward scheme to recognize meritorious and exemplary teams or individuals on a regular basis, and provide them with enhanced training and advancement. For officers whose performance remains persistently substandard despite supervision and assistance, their appointment should be terminated in a timely manner. Enhancing the civil service disciplinary mechanism so that appropriate punishment can be promptly imposed in a fair and just manner on officers found to have misconducted themselves. The measures above aim at encouraging civil servants to take responsibility, strive for constant improvements, work hard for the public, and actively provide quality service to the public. 2. To implement the result-oriented governing strategy, the CE and secretaries of departments and directors of bureau have set about 110 various indicators, including key performance indicators or KPIs, and have asked all policy bureaus and departments to set other relevant indicators for monitoring the progress of various policies and review their effectiveness, so that prompt adjustments and improvements can be made. The CE has emphasized repeatedly that the objective of setting indicators is for monitoring the progress of individual projects. The government will work unreservedly to meet the targets set in order to ensure governance efficacy. In case of slippage, we will review the situation, including whether factors beyond our control have come about, or whether certain objective factors, such as procedures, legislation, and resources, have posed restrictions on individual indicators, or whether more effective coordination or division of labor among policy bureaus or departments is called for. We will also take them forward and make suitable adjustments as the actual circumstances so warrant. Thank you, President. Dr. Tik Chi-yuen. President, in the policy address, the CE has emphasized the merits and the reward and punishment system for civil servants. As political accountability officials, there is high expectation from the public for them. However, from the main reply, I don't see any new system of accountability or reward and punishment system. It seems that you are being lenient to the high officials. For KPI slippage, you would consider different limitations, including factors beyond your control and so on. Well, this is just an excuse. If political appointees fail to achieve the KPIs, this is not because of factors beyond their control or other factors. What will be the punishment for them? Dr. Tik Chi-yuen, you have to understand that you can only ask one follow-up question. Secretary. Thank you, President. As mentioned in the main reply, under the existing accountability system, there is punishment. For politically appointed officials, if they perform in a substandard manner and or are in violation of rules, there will be punishments, including issuance of warnings, reprimand, and if called for political officials, the CE can raise to the Central People's Government to terminate their appointments. Mr. Kenneth Lau, President. There are more than 100 KPIs set out in the new policy address for monitoring the efficiency and effectiveness of measures. It shows that the government is not shying away from difficulties. At the same time, it would bring pressure to officials. They may simply work for ostentatious results. So how can we avoid such situations? Secretary. Thank you. At the start of the new term government, we have widely canvassed views from community, including Legislative Council members. There are many calls for setting up KPIs so that the public can effectively monitor the government. In my main reply, I have mentioned that the main purpose of the KPIs is for the CE to monitor the progress of the measures, as well as for the public to monitor the progress so that the team can work together to achieve the intended results. Also, transparency is ensured by the KPI so that the public can supervise and monitor the government's performance. In the formulation of the KPIs, we have taken into consideration different factors, and they are devised using scientific method. And also, we have consulted the public and our team in setting up the KPIs. The point of the KPIs are not to put stress on the officials, but rather give incentive to our team members to work together for the benefits of society. Mr. Chan Shi-hong, thank you. I'm pleased to see that most of the politically appointed officials and principal officials of the new government are pragmatic. Many officials have already achieved admirable results. Well, this is not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. We can't quantify everything, and there have to be different standards. PAOs are subject to the regulation of the PAO code. In case of violation, the CE can suspend or dismiss these officials. But we think we have to put equal focus on carrot and stick. So in terms of carrot, that is reward. What are the rewards? To encourage officials to be more responsible to their policy portfolios, enhancing their governance quality, so that, like President Xi said, there can be a mechanism for promoting the meritorious and demoting the substandard performers. Thank you for affirming our work. Mr. Chen mentioned carrots. I think he meant rewards. Well, I can share with you that as principal officials, our original aspiration is to contribute to the development of Hong Kong, the country, and serve the public. That is our greatest ambition. In terms of remuneration, rewards, and benefits, those are not our major concern. The greatest reward for us is that if we can actually serve the public, enhance the sense of gain for the people during the process of our policy implementation, that would already be the greatest reward. In terms of tangible reward, we have an honorary system to recognize the achievers. So may I venture to speak on behalf of the political appointees? As long as we can serve the country and Hong Kong, that would be our greatest reward. Mr. Chen Yong. Thank you, President. Secretary. Those PAOs I know in the new term of government are very hardworking. They never take leave. Even if they have contracted COVID, they are still working at home. Now, there are more than 110 KPIs set out in the policy address. So how can we ensure that those merit rewards are given rewards and those that warrant punishments are given punishment? How can we make it more easily understandable by the public? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, President, and thank you, Mr. Chen. On punishment for PAOs, the arrangement has been set out in the main reply. For the civil service, the Secretary for Civil Service has mentioned about an enhancement to the reward and punishment mechanism, which will speed up the efficiency of the system. We attach equal importance to reward and punishment. The Civil Service Bureau will take forward the Chief Executive Award Scheme and so on to give incentive to the meritorious ones. For PAOs, I will not repeat. Our aspiration is only to serve Hong Kong. Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, President. First of all, on behalf of the public, we have to say that this term of the government is much more pragmatic and results-oriented than previous ones. We do see your achievements, but I don't think this question is fair to you. Actually, for the public, they think they also appreciate the difficulties of your job. Sometimes sometimes you would have to resign on your own if anything happens. At the same time, you enjoy a tremendous amount of power. So my question is, how can you integrate the work of the political appointees and ordinary civil servants? Now, if the team members are incompatible with each other, the efficiency of the team would naturally be low. So can you be more clear on job appointments and also the appointment system of civil servants? Thank you, Mr. Stephen Ho, for your question. On our collaboration with the civil service, from my own experience, I can tell you that there is a really close working relationship between the teams. We would set down the policies, and the civil service would be responsible for implementing the policies to serve the public. We have a very clear division of labor. And the Civil Service Bureau is responsible for the deployment of civil servants. There is a fair and just system, which would take into consideration of strengths of individuals. As political appointees, as principal officials, we would be responsible for leading the civil service team to achieve our policy measures. So the system is working well. Secretary, do you have any supplements? In our daily line of work, if there are any adjustments needed on human resource management, we would raise the issue with the CSB, and there will be follow-up actions. Mr. Kisson-Yang, now political appointees and PAOs are for devising the policies, and principal officials are responsible for implementation, and civil servants are responsible for executing the policies. Now, principal officials are to be held responsible for the success of the policies. Now, there are rewards and punishments and KPIs for civil service. What about principal officials? Are there also KPIs for them so that when they are doing well, they would be recognized and rewarded, and when they are doing poorly, there would be punishment. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Yang. First, the design of the KPIs is not for gauging the performance of political officials. That is only an indicator to judge the progress and success of projects. Well, actually, the reward and punishment system for principal officials is the same as ordinary civil servants. Mr. Stanley Lee. Thank you, President. As the representatives of people, our job is to monitor the performance of the government. PAOs are also part of the government. You haven't answered part 2 of Dr. Tik Chi-yuen's question. How can you ensure that the PAOs are achieving the KPIs? Secretary. Thank you, President, and thank you, Mr. Lee, for your question. On the achievements of KPIs, we would regularly report to the public in terms of the achievements of the KPIs.
Question number 2, Mr. Dominic LEE. President, it is learned that with the epidemic becoming stabilized and restrictions for prevention gradually relaxed, quite a number of major international sporting events have been relaunched gradually. On re-establishing Hong Kong's good reputation as an event capital, we have informed this Council, given that the government will set up the Mega Arts and Cultural Events Fund, and 4 major events will be funded annually starting from next year, and then it has been reported that the funding ceiling will be $15 million, whether the government will consider increasing its allocation so as to raise the funding ceiling for each event and increase the number of events. If so, of the details, if not, why not? 2, whether it will consider focusing the fund on events which have never been held in Hong Kong or which have been switched from Hong Kong to other places, as well as the formulating KPIs for the fund. If so, of the details. If not, why not? And 3, as the authorities have established the M-Mark system that awards the M-Mark status to recognized major sporting events in Hong Kong, and funding is provided, whether it has assessed its effectiveness and promoting Hong Kong as an events capital in the past 5 years, and what enhancement measures will be put in place in the coming year to upgrade the 12 events that are currently receiving the M-Mark funding and to attract more major sports events to be held in Hong Kong. Secretary for Culture, Sports and Tourism. President, the development of arts and culture, creative industries, sports and tourism complements and drives each other. In particular, organizing different types of large-scale events and attracting international events to Hong Kong is an indispensable part of the development. My reply to the question is as follows. 1. The 14th Five-Year Plan has expressed clear support for Hong Kong to be an East-Meets-West Center for international cultural exchange. This has not only manifested the country's expectation of Hong Kong, but it has also given full recognition to the diverse growth of arts, culture, creative industries in Hong Kong over the past years, and provided the sector with continuous development opportunities. This positioning echoes the directions of the Culture and Tourism Development Plan for the GPA, which has indicated support for Hong Kong to be more competitive global platform for cultural exchange. The government has seized Hong Kong's unique creative atmosphere and formulated strategic directions to support this development. It is promulgated in the policy address that the government will set up a Mega Arts and Cultural Events Fund to entice mega events to anchor at Hong Kong with a view to developing Hong Kong into an arts and cultural metropolis. The Mega Arts and Cultural Events Committee, comprising leaders from the arts and cultural sectors, will advise the government on the operation of the fund, as well as assist the government in fighting for arts and cultural events to anchor in Hong Kong and assessing applications. The CSTB is making preparations for the setting of the Mega Events Committee. At the same time, CSTP will launch the pilot scheme for the Mega Events Fund for applications by signature arts and cultural events in 2023. Based on the experience, CSTP will regularize the application procedure for the Mega Events Fund in 2023, and the committee will advise on the assessment of the applications. We've already formulated the KPIs for the Mega Events Fund to fund around 4 events annually with a total attendance of 100,000. The government has all along been committed to promoting sports development and developing Hong Kong into a center for major international sports events. In 2004, the MMARC system was introduced to support NSAs to host major international sports events. In order to further enhance support for NSAs to stage international sports events, the government allocated $500 million for the major sports events matching grant scheme in 2019 to encourage further sponsorship for business sector. Measures to improve the scheme include raising the funding ceiling to $10 million, abolishing the sliding scale, expanding the scope to cover exhibition matches or tournaments organized by NSAs that involve world-class top athletes or teams and can attract a large number of spectators. And 3, enhancing flexibility in the use of the event surplus. Since its implementation in April 2019, the scheme has been well received and the number of events has increased from 13 in the past to 15 in 2019. However, some of the MMARC events were cancelled due to the social incidents in 2019, and most of the major events scheduled for 2020 to the first half of 2022 were cancelled or postponed due to COVID. From April 2019 to September 2022, a total of 45 MMARC event applications were received. Among them, 10 were successfully held, receiving $37.31 million of matching grant and attracting about 260,000 spectators. The CE stated in the policy address that in order to attract more major international sports events, the government will consider further enhancing the system, including raising the funding ceiling for each event, abolishing the quota of MMARC events that can be organized by the same applicant each year. The eligibility will also be reviewed and relaxed to cover events organized by NSAs and related organizations to support more major international events to be held in Hong Kong. Mr. Dominic LEE, President. From the reply, we learned that under the leadership of Mr. Kevin Yeung, we've seen better development in the culture, art, and sports. Now, the first part of my question remains unanswered. Now, you have this ceiling of $15 million for mega events to be held. It may not be sufficient. So will you consider increasing the ceiling? We discussed with the trade, other than the funding, the venue is also another issue. The successful snooker championship, I mean, they had difficulty finding the venue. The first priority was not the Coliseum, but the QE Stadium. They talked with the LCSD about the availability of venues, and they said that the events organized at the Coliseum would be different from a concert. Well, Mr. Lee, please do not digress too much from the question. So will you improve the arrangement in terms of venues? Secretary? Well, there are two questions there. The first one is the funding. We've just launched this scheme, and this represents our preliminary review. We would take stock of a number of projects and the applications, and the Mega Fund Committee will have further discussion. But initially, we're talking about $15 million. This is no small sum for a mega event. But anyhow, as we take these forward, I will certainly consider this in greater detail. Venue has always been a problem. So in terms of arts and culture facilities and sporting facilities, the policy address has put in place a 10-year blueprint so that we can plan ahead for these arts and culture and sporting facilities. As to the applications, it all depends on the time, and we do have the procedures for mega events. We would provide more flexibility in terms of the timing. Indeed, the snooker championship originally was scheduled to be taking place at Kiwi Stadium, but it took place at the Coliseum. But we had the largest size of spectators, and we will continue to liaise with the sporting sector in relation to all these mega events. Mr. Vincent Cheng, President. Now, the Rugby 7, the Liechtenstein exhibition at WKCD, and also the snooker championship, they are wonderful events. I hope that the government can speed up the pacing to return to normality. Well, you already put the question, Mr. Cheng. Well, you asked whether the government can speed up the pacing. Well, you don't have to address the first question, the Secretary. Please address, raise the question. Well, can we speed up the pace for normality, because people would like to have more visitors to come to Hong Kong during Christmas? Secretary? President, thank you. I'm sure that this is the shared aspirations of the people of Hong Kong, for Hong Kong to be back to normal. Depending on the scientific data and the pandemic, we will try to relax the COVID curbs as far as possible. And this is what the Chief Executive has been saying all along in public. That this is November and December is coming up. And during the festive period, we hope that we can take part in these activities as much as possible. So I urge everyone who hasn't been inoculated to get inoculated and observe the COVID protocol, keep the face mask on and wash our hands. When the situation becomes better, there is more room for us to have more further relaxation. This is a common aspiration. Mr. Benson Look. President, in his principal reply, the Secretary has highlighted some of the measures, and this is something that we do look forward to. We are seeing the organization of more mega events, and this is really burnishing our guild reputation as a mega event capital. I think we have to lobby for more such events to be held in Hong Kong. So will the administration take reference from the 2003 experience to set up the relaunch committee, and also the event committee, and will you follow these post-SARS example to organize these committees to lobby more mega events to come to Hong Kong? Secretary? Well, we have a different approach at different times, and this is also a shared aspiration that as the COVID curbs are becoming more relaxed, and as the caseload is coming down, we should do more to support not just art, culture, and sports sectors, and also the mega events, but we'd like to relaunch the economy so that every single one of the community can stand to benefit. So the policy bureaus are putting their heads together to come up with measures to how we can take this forward. In terms of tourism, for instance, we help the group in, group out arrangement for the tour groups to Hong Kong. If they come to Hong Kong as a group, we can have all these relaxed measures to help the businesses in Hong Kong and to improve the situation. So different policy bureaus are considering how best we can help different sectors in the community. Mr. Ma Fung Kwok, Chairman, President, thank you. In his reply, the Secretary mentioned the fund for mega events and also the Landmark event fund, and the policy address refers to the tour for talents. Now, I know of a competition to do with the flying, and this event, the organizer came and get in touch with the government and didn't get off the ground. I know that this organization would like to bring this international event to Hong Kong and have this relaunched. What attitude does the government have to introduce certain mega events that have never been tried in Hong Kong, and how can the government lobby them to come to Hong Kong? Secretary? Well, with regard to the mega events, as long as they can foster economic development and bring good participation opportunities and entertainment to Hong Kong, we'll certainly be willing to consider. There may be certain events that may have difficulties, but we are only too delighted to discuss and resolve all these issues with the organizers and make them happen. Now, we've seen all these mega events recently, and we are so thrilled about them. And like the snooker championship and the rugby 7, we had a lot of liaison with different organizations before they got off the ground. So with regard to major or mega events, my bureau will certainly be rendering assistance to make them happen. Mr. Jiming, President, like member said, we have all these mega events one after another, and this is announcing to the world that Hong Kong is back. Other than reviving the events that have been suspended, we should have a good enough publicity campaign. So what plan does the government have? Will you be inviting international celebrities to take part in the publicity? And online, are you going to be inviting some KOLs to be part of the publicity campaign? Secretary? We will adopt appropriate measures. There may be different fans for different events. For the sporting events, the NSAs will be disseminating the information and inviting the relevant teams to come to Hong Kong. And for tourism events, we do it through the tourism board to mount publicity. In fact, the tourism board is carrying out a whole series of measures as the COVID curbs are being relaxed further. We will be targeting at the neighboring regions or in targeted markets, and we will be rolling out all these measures and inviting or disseminating the information to invite the visitors to Hong Kong, and also to highlight the attractiveness about Hong Kong to all these targeted markets. And work is in hand. Mr. Perry, your President, when organizing these mega sporting and cultural events, I'm sure that we can revive our reputation as an event capital. We can also lure a high value added visit to Hong Kong. And the timing of the events will also be important. That we don't have the peak or lax seasons. The tourism sector is in dire straits. Now, like when the convention exhibition sector is doing well, and we can organize more such events. So would there be any quota to make sure that all these mega events will assist the development of the tourism sector? Secretary, well, certainly we will be prepared to coordinate to make sure that there will be mega events that will be happening throughout the year. There are certain competitions that are world tour competitions. They're bound by a specific timetable, and they have a specific time to be in Hong Kong. So we cannot decide on the exact timing of these events. In particular, for events that are launched by the Hong Kong SAR government, it would be easier. But for mega international events and cultural events, it all depends on the availability of these organizers. But we certainly coordinate. Mr. Wong Lik Chen, President, we have the world-class at the BKCD facilities, and our athletes are achieving better and better performance. In order to help the MMARC events, will the government be considering an art and culture and sporting month per year, so that this can drive the development of the tourism sector, and this will also tell a good story about Hong Kong outside Hong Kong? Secretary, as I said in answer to Mr. Yu's question, there are certain events and they're time specific. They are bound by their own calendar. During the peak seasons, during summer holiday, people tend to travel more. How can we attract more people to Hong Kong to showcase a diverse range of attractions? I mean, we have the heritage travel, we have the green travel, we also have a lot of dining experiences. So during the summer vacation, are we going to do more art and culture tours? We'll certainly consider this depending on the timetable.
Question 3, Mr. Stanley Ho. President, as mentioned in the 2022 policy address, the government will establish the steering group on integration. The 2022 policy address has pointed out that the national strategy, such as the 14th Five-Year Plan and the Belt and Road Initiative, have injected continuous impetus to the growth of Hong Kong. There are views that in order to realize Hong Kong's 8 centers positioning as set out in the 14th Five-Year Plan, relevant human resources plans are a crucial component part. In this connection, will the government inform the Council in respect of the plans for the impetus set out in the aforesaid policy blueprint, whether the government has formulated corresponding medium and long-term resources plans so as to allow more talents to have the opportunities to participate in the development of the 8 centers and seize the opportunity, and if it has, of the number and types of talents needed, as well as the measures in place to achieve those ends. Ms. Secretary for Constitution and Mainland Affairs, As announced in the 2022 policy address, the government will establish the steering group on integrating international development to be chaired by the chief executive with 3 secretaries of development of departments as deputies, merging ahead with initiatives across bureaus and providing steer from a strategic and macro perspective. The work of the steering group will cover 4 main areas, including formulating strategic plans for Hong Kong to dovetail with the 14th National 5-Year Plan and proactively forging ahead with development and collaboration. The 14th 5-Year Plan has supported the development of Hong Kong in 8 key areas, that is the 8 centers, including the International Financial Center, International Innovation and Technology Center, East Meets West Center for International Cultural Exchange, International Trade Center, International Shipping Center, International Aviation Center for International Legal and Dispute Resolution Services in the Asia-Pacific Group, as well as Regional Intellectual Property Trading Center. The government attaches great importance to dovetailing with the national strategies and enhancing the impetus for the growth of Hong Kong. The government has been compiling manpower projections on a regular basis to assess the broad trends and future manpower supply and requirements in different local key economic sectors so as to at the macro level. The last round of manpower projection was compiled in 2019, projecting an overall manpower shortfall of about 170,000, crossing all different levels in 2027. In 2027, this round of projection, however, could not capture some major changes, such as the pandemic in the past few years. The policy address has announced to enhance the methodology of the new round of manpower projection. Specifically, we will adopt a 4-pronged approach. 1, we will adopt the 8 centers under the 14th 5-Year Plan in the analytical framework to study the manpower and skills requirements of relevant data in key industries. To achieve this, apart from the conventional analysis and projections and based on statistical models over the economic labor force and employment statistics compiled by the Census and Statistics Department, we will also explore big data analytics on job vacancies collected over a period of time to better understand the manpower supply and demand in different sectors. We will strengthen the collection and analysis of qualitative information and data under the new round of projection. We plan to conduct more extensive in-depth sectoral consultation, cover key industries under the 8 centers. The Labor and Welfare Bureau will collaborate with relevant policy bureaus and departments in widely consulting participants and stakeholders of the key industries, such as business association, public organizations, and key enterprises to collect information on current and future requirements of the 8 centers and the related industries, professions, and required skills, and to gauge their views on the business and outlook into the future. The new round of projections also cover the technical trades required for the essential services supporting the city's daily operation and management, such as technicians for maintaining various major facilities and mechanical and engineering works, etc. We integrate the data and the information. The projection period will be shortened from 10 years to 5 years with a more frequent updating cycle. The projection could reflect the trends in a more up-to-date manner. We anticipate that the key findings of the new manpower projection will be available in the 3rd quarter of 2024, and a detailed report will be promulgated in early 2025. Projection findings will help the government to formulate more detailed and better short and medium long-term plans. Now, it's expected that only by the third quarter of 24 will the study be completed, and the report will only be promulgated in 2025. Now, before that, what measures will the government have to implement the plans instead of waiting till 2025? Yes, to come up with a enhanced manpower projection, it takes time. We need to collaborate and conduct interviews and so on. But that doesn't mean that the government will not do any work in the meantime. We have the manpower list of shortages. We have started the work on coming up with a detailed listing of manpower shortages in major industries. We will update the plan as necessary. Ms. Tang Yan. Now, the 14th five-year plan supports Hong Kong becoming a center, East meet West center for cultural exchange. Now, this will help the young people develop and move upstream. Now, these have this government has a 10-year plan, but this takes too long. Now, I met a young person who won a prize in music. But in order to chase his dream, he has to switch from local school to international school and eventually to overseas school. Now, what plans do you have to retain the local talents, young talents? This is important. It's not just in culture and arts. Our young people are very capable. We have to work on a multi-pronged approach. Now, we want to be flexible in our education. There also has to be enough scope for them to develop locally. Mr. Lim Kwok. Now, looking at the policy address, it says that the subvented universities will offer subjects dovetailing with the 8 centers. Now, looking at our young people, there is still a high unemployment rate. Now, so in the short, medium to long term, are there methods or approaches to help them to change their professions to meet those needs? Now, as the economy develops, past skills may not be relevant. So all along we have offered a lot of resources for young people. Even in the 30s, they can upgrade themselves and upgrade their skills to on the continuous development fund, and they can also take courses in the Employees Retraining Board to meet the new opportunities. The Secretary talked about manpower projections based on demand. Now, on supply, have you talked to the tertiary institutions which offer various types of degrees on how they relate to these projections? Otherwise, the supply may not meet the demand. Now, we understand what the members have said. The major universities update re-enrollment policies every 3 years. Now, some of these policies are updated every 3 years. As for the self-supporting, self-financing institutions, they are even more flexible. Now, we can have regard to, they can have regard to the data for the coming 5 years so that they can dovetail more with Hong Kong's economic development needs. Looking at the labor participation rate of Hong Kong, which is only 59.1%, now this is relatively low compared to many developed economies. According to the latest manpower projection, it's expected by 2027, the overall labor participation rate will drop to 54.9%. Will the government lie flat and let the rate drop? Now, as for the participation rate for women, it's even more so because of celibacy, late marriage, etc. There was only a slight increase. Now, will the government offer child care services or other measures to attract women to join the labor force? Will you have concrete measures to raise the labor participation rate? Now, the labor participation rate, now in 2021, it was 57.2% overall. For women, it's 49.6%. For males, 65.7%. So the government is very anxious. We want to attract more people to join the labor force. As for women, as Mr. Chow Siu-chung said, now we have to let women who work be able to look after their families. So we will provide more resources for after-school care of children. So we also work more closely with the business sector so that they can offer types of work that do not require long working hours. Now, because that would suit the needs of many women. So we need to collaborate with the business sector. Also, a lot of our population is over 65. Now we want to attract more elderly people who are able to work to join the labor force. Mr. Kit Chong. Now, the new manpower projections will only be available in early 2025. Now, there has been outflow of a population of 140,000 in the past 2 years, as the CE noted. Now, we also have a shortage of manpower in lower and medium level of the labor force. Now, what plans does the government have to address those issues? For the middle and lower level of our labor force, how do we upgrade their skills? Now, the Employee Retraining Board plays a very important role. Every year, there have been over 100,000 persons enrollments in courses. Now, we hope to upgrade the skills for our labor participants at the medium and lower levels to provide more impetus for our economies. Mr. Tang Fei. Thank you, President. Now, according to the 14th five-year plan, Hong Kong has to develop 8 centers. Now, Innovation Technology Center, East-West, Cultural Exchange Center. So these are new centers. So we may have a shortage of manpower there. Now, manpower training takes time. Now, so the Secretary mentioned the big data analysis for providing better analysis. Now, is there a mechanism there for resolving the problem of training taking quite lengthy time? Now, every major city in the world faces this challenge. Training manpower is a major imperative, but it takes time. Now, very often after detailed analysis, if there is indeed a shortage locally, we can import professional talents from abroad. Now, this is one of the 2 approaches being allowed by the government. Now, but the emphasis is always on nurturing local talents. Now, this is a goal of pursued by our universities. Now, we will use big data for analysis. We can get the data from local recruitment companies. They have vacancies that number hundreds of thousands. Now, with more scientific analysis of these data, we will know which are the professions or occupations which have greater manpower needs. These will facilitate our analysis and projections. Mr. Ye Kin-yuen. Now, I believe the Secretary has heard the Liberal Party telling you that we have been unable to hire our staff. Now, Dr. Nelson Chow has recently released a paper on the manpower shortages. Now, your answers said that now that the report will be completed in late 2024, and then it will be announced in early 2025. If it's accepted, then training will begin. Now, so the supply will only be available, say, by 2027. So how do we resolve the difficulties in the meantime? I'd like to ask whether the government will consider importing talents and professional people, and you can stop those imports once we have enough local supply. Now, we adopt an approach integrating short, medium, and long-term measures. Now, we want to be more accurate and scientific in our manpower projections so that we can formulate our policies accordingly. Now, in the near term, as you can see in the policy address, on the shortage of professional staff, we have these schemes of importing high-end talents so that the industries can meet the manpower shortages in the meantime. So for both near, medium, and long term, we have different measures. Mr. Low Wai-keung. Now, the Secretary said that in the 2019 study that there will be a shortage of 170,000 by 2027. Now, but we understand that the CE from the CE that the labor force has dropped by 140,000 in the past 2 years. Now, has that been taken into account in your projections? The projections in the last round, that is by the one in 2019, forecast that will be 770,000 short in 2027. But this hasn't taken into account the pandemic in recent years and the changes in the labor force. Now, the CE's figure of 140,000 loss of manpower hasn't been reflected.
Question 4, Ms. Priscilla Leung. President, currently, the 8 universities funded by the University Grants Committee, UGC, have each established a council that serves as the governing and decision-making body. Regarding the governance and decision-making of these universities, will the government inform this council? 1. Whether it will consider amending the ordinances and statutes governing the 8 UGC-funded universities so as to prevent the school management of these universities from circumventing their respective councils and allowing a committee comprising the school management to decide on significant school policies such as the recruitment of president and vice presidents of the university. 2. Whether it knows if the councils of the 8 UGC-funded universities have the authority to revoke the decisions made without their scrutiny, such as a change in the design of the university emblem, if they have of the details, if not the reasons for that. And 3. As there are views pointing out that the number of external members of the councils of some UGC-funded universities are fewer than that of the internal members, rendering the public unable to effectively monitor the governance of such universities. Whether the government has reviewed if the councils of the 8 UGC-funded universities have duly performed their role to monitor the governance of universities on behalf of the public. If it has reviewed and the outcome is in the affirmative, of the details. If the review outcome is in the negative, whether it will consider amending the ordinances and statutes governing such universities so as to balance the proportion of internal members to external members in their councils. Secretary for Education. President, the 8 University Grants Committee UGC-funded universities are autonomous institutions established under their own legislation. They enjoy autonomy in are held accountable for matters such as the development of their curriculum and academic standards, the selection of staff and students, the initiation and conduct of research, and the internal deployment of resources. Each university has its own council as its governing and decision-making body. Generally speaking, the Council is the supreme governing body and has the authority to make decisions on matters such as the overall decision, strategy, personnel appointments, and financial management in accordance with the principle of institutional autonomy. Certain universities also have in place the court, which is the supreme advisory body of the university and is generally consulted by the Council on important university matters, such as motions concerning overall university policy. Having regard to the unique background, history, development, and operation of each university, the composition of councils and governance structures vary from one university to another. The Council may establish committees to deal with certain executive matters as it sees fit in accordance with its university ordinance. At present, the ordinances of certain universities also specify the establishment of specific committees and their terms of reference. For example, the Honorary Degrees Committee advises on the award of honorary degrees. The Finance Committee deals with matters relating to the finances. The Administration and Planning Committee is responsible for, among other things, assisting the university president in carrying out their duties and proposing development plans. These committees are required to report to the Council or the Chancellor. Our reply to the questions raised by Ms. Leung is as follows. 1 and 2. As provided for in the UGC notes on procedures, the appointment of the university's management teams is a matter within the autonomy of the universities. The ordinances and statutes of the universities empower the council to appoint key personnel, and the councils make appointment decisions in accordance with the statutes prescribed there by their governing ordinances. Where necessary, the councils may establish committees to deal with the recruitment and selection matters in accordance with the powers conferred by law, with the final decision to be made by the councils. The details of the decision-making of universities, such as what decisions are to be made by the councils or may be delegated to their committees, and the divisions of powers and responsibilities between the councils, the committees, and the management teams are matters to be determined by the universities in accordance with the principle of institutional autonomy and the requirements of the relevant ordinances. In general, the councils are discharging their responsibilities under their respective ordinances. The government and the UGC are committed to safeguarding the academic freedom and institutional autonomy of the universities while requiring them to maintain transparency and public accountability in their operation for good governance and to ensure that public funds are well spent so that universities can operate effectively in accordance with their missions and roles in the overall interest of students and the community. Over the years, the UGC has reviewed the governance of the universities from time to time and submitted to the government reports with recommendations, including the composition of the governance structure and the mechanism for delegation and reporting. The universities have reviewed their governance structures and decision-making mechanisms with reference to these recommendations to ensure that everything are conducive to good governance and meets their operational needs. Changes or updates have been proposed as necessary. If they are related to the provisions of existing legislation, the universities will propose bills to make amendments. In the past, most of these bills were submitted by universities to LegCo for scrutiny in the form of private members' bills and were enacted after discussion and voted by LegCo, during which the public and internal stakeholders were involved. In addition, to further achieve good governance among the UGC-funded universities, the UGC has entered into University Accountability Agreements, UAA, with them, starting from 2019 to 2020 triennium, which has been updated to tie in with the implementation of the 2022 to 25 triennium. In addition to setting up the overall strategy and principles, the UAA contains performance indicators in key activity areas such as teaching and research, including 1, quality of student experience in teaching and learning, 2, research performance and postgraduate experience, 3, knowledge transfer and wider engagement, 4, increased internationalization and engagement with mainland, and 5, the financial health, social responsibility, and sustainability of institutions with a view to enhancing the accountability and transparency of the universities. The operations and development of these universities are supported by the government through recurrent funding from the UGC and other sources from the community. They nurture talents needed for the development and promote academic excellence in Hong Kong. It's therefore essential for universities to maintain good governance. It's also normal for the community to comment on the structures of the universities. At the same time, discussions in these areas will inevitably affect decision-making and day-to-day operations of the universities. To ensure that these proposals do not adversely affect the operation of universities, it's important that stakeholders have a frank communication with the universities to come up with a way forward that is in the best interest of stakeholders and universities and the community, thereby achieving the common goal of maintaining good governance. Ms. Leung, well, I think that I was asking about one thing, and the secretary answered me something else. I would like to ask a precise question. In June, the Education Bureau gave us some figures. the members ratio between external and internal members. For CTU, 68% are external members, and for UST, 65%. For the Chinese university, there are only 17% of external members. We think that the Council of Universities should play the function of monitoring the operation of universities. Under Section 9A of the CUHK Ordinance, it states that the University Council could, by circulation of papers, deal with other matters, unless 5 members and the Vice-Chancellor specified otherwise in paper. As you can see, that a lot of the matters are closed-door matters. Is it the reason why there was the saga of recruitment of vice-chancellors as well as the change of university emblem? Universities are using huge amount of public monies, but we don't have an effective mechanism to monitor their governance. Shouldn't the Education Bureau take the initiative to amend relevant ordinances? In relation to the question about the composition of CUHKs, 17% of them are external members. It seems, on the face of it, that is a lot lower than the figures for others. But for each universities, they have their own history and development. So the composition of each council is different. The composition of councils are related to the respective ordinances. If we want to make changes to the composition of the councils, as the composition itself is regulated and governed by the university ordinances, well then the proper procedure have to be put in place, which is a change of the ordinance by way of a private member's bill. As I said, the composition of the council is contingent upon the university's history. If changes are to be made, proper procedures have to be followed. Ms. Leung just now mentioned about more participation by external members. This will be conducive to including voices from outside the university. As a result of these views, universities have made changes. Say, for example, changing the composition of the councils to enable more external members to participate. We have a frank communication with universities because this is the best way to come up with a solution. Regarding the governance of universities, well, everything is done in accordance with their ordinances. Each university is different. Good governance is the basis of institutional autonomy and academic freedom. We closely monitor whether these universities are operating in accordance with their respective ordinance in terms of their governance structures and governance efficiency. We understand that there are different views on governance and structures. When institutional autonomy and academic freedom are not affected, we require universities to maintain good transparency and are accountable to the public. We have included comments and views of members as well as the relevant governing articles and documents. Mr. Tommy Cheung, your reply given to Ms. Leung contained many details. I think it might be difficult for me to argue with you from point to point because I don't have enough time. I don't agree with you when it comes to points like good governance and academic freedom. In the last part of your answer, I would like to ask a question from a more macro perspective. You said that, well, words to the effect that raising comments and making criticisms by the community on governance is normal. And you also said that it is important that stakeholders in the community have a frank communication with universities to come up with a way forward that is in the best interest of stakeholders in the universities and community, thereby achieving the common goal of good governance. Well, the saga of a university emblem is not a matter under daily operation. And you could see that the management team could completely ignore the councils and made decisions on their own. Stakeholders in the community, not stakeholders of the universities, had a strong view saying that there should be better communication. How will the communication be done? Here in the council, a lot of stakeholders have an issue with the governance of the CUHK. Secretary, I thank Mr. Cheung for his question. First, in relation to good governance of universities, just now I mentioned that good governance is the basis. I did not say that institutional autonomy and academic freedom are used to act as defenses. Views and concerns expressed are in the interest of universities as well as students. That's why I said that there should be a frank communication in order to come up with a way forward. In the council, we have representatives from the community, from the university, and from different areas. In theory, the council comprises different views from different quarters. Using the emblem incident as an example, well, indeed, UGC-funded universities may set up committees and establish their own councils to govern the university, and they may, in accordance with the ordinance, establish committee. For the emblem of CUHK, it is under the purview of the Administration and Planning Committee, and in accordance with Section 109 of the CUHK Ordinance, you find provisions of the functions of the committee, one of which is to advise the Vice-Chancellor in carrying out their duties and proposing development plans. So it's not the case that the committee made its own decision. Well, the committee will have to report to the Vice-Chancellor via the Council. So in relation to the details of the decisions and the division of powers between the committee and the Council, and who is to make what decision, these are internal matters, and is not for the government to be involved. If there are any violations of the provisions in the governing ordinances, relevant stakeholders, of course, can turn to the law to deal with these matters. What has been answered? My question was simple. When stakeholders of the community have different views from the university, what communication channels are there? Please ask your question. Do we need to do it via the LegCo? Communication between stakeholders and the universities may be done through the Council. There are other avenues for the university to listen to views from the community and from legislators. There are many different channels. If need be, the government may assist. So it's not the case that the universities would not be able to hear views. Thank you. Ms. Lillian Kwok. In 2002, the UGC issued a report suggesting that universities conduct a review of their governance. The one relating to the Hong Kong U suggested that the council would be streamlined from 50 to 42 people. For the CUHK, there were also proposals in 2016 to reduce the size of the council and change the proportion of external and internal members. It's been 20 years since the UGC report. The CUHK still hasn't changed their composition. Can you tell us the reason why and what your views are? In relation to the report in 2002, the CUHK, just like the other 8 universities, have conducted a review of their governance structures, including whether the council is fit to serve its purpose. After the review, they have implemented certain recommendations. In 2003, there was the Audit Committee and other committees. In November 2013, in the Education Panel, there was a discussion about changing relevant provisions, but there were different views. And in 2016, for the third time, there was a discussion about setting up a task force to streamline the composition and other recommendations. Similarly, the proposal in 2016 could not reach a consensus and was still outstanding. Ms. Jovi Chan. The CUHK of these UGC-funded universities see a highest ratio of internal members. Rocky Tuan, which was due to retire in 2023, was retained for another term, that is between 2024 to 2027. And for this university report in 2019, the Vice-Chancellor's annual salary is $6.3 million. In relation to the renewal of contract of the Vice-Chancellor, did the Bureau know about this, or they only found out just like we did when we read the newspapers? Just now, the member mentioned a number of things. First, the ratio of members, and that is completely irrelevant from the recruitment of a vice-chancellor, and the remuneration of vice-chancellor does not have a causal relation with the number of members in the council. The appointment of vice-chancellors and whether the Bureau is aware of it. I must emphasize that the recruitment of vice-chancellors is within the autonomy of the universities. The universities will have to follow internal regulations and rules to conduct the recruitment of vice-chancellors. The government will not be involved. If a university has set up in accordance with their laws, the appointment committee, normally speaking, they will start a global recruitment exercise. The council will, in the interest of long-term interest, development interest of the universities and the well-being of universities, empower relevant appointment committees to select a suitable candidate to become the vice-chancellor. If a university, under the governance ordinance, found that they have difficulties in the recruitment of vice-chancellors, they may move a bill to change it.
Question 5, the Honourable KWOK Wai-keung. Thank you, President. Since the implementation of the statutory minimum wage, SMW, the authorities have not conducted a comprehensive review of the regime. There are views pointing out that the SMW level continues to lag behind and is grossly out of tune with the actual economic situation, resulting in an ever-increasing livelihood pressure on the grassroots. On the other hand, the government put forth in the 2022 policy address the invitation of the Minimum Wage Commission to conduct a study on how to enhance the review mechanism for the SMW level. In this connection, will the government inform this council whether the relevant authorities, 1, will explore the proposal of a review a year that is conducting a review on the SMW level annually in the aforesaid study and of the expected time for completing a study and implementing the enhanced review mechanism. 2, will conduct a comprehensive review on the mechanism for determining the SMW level in the aforesaid study, so that SMW can achieve the effects of narrowing the disparity between the rich and the poor and improving the problem of working poverty, if so, of the specific details and timetable of the review, if not the reasons for that. And 3, will, by drawing reference from the practice of certain countries and regions, to conduct empirical studies, conducting tracking studies on groups such as people with disabilities, elderly persons, women and young people in respect of the implementation of the SMW regime, so as to evaluate the impacts of the regime on such groups. If so, of the details, if not, the reasons for that. Secretary for Labour and Welfare. President, the Minimum Wage Ordinance MWO establishes the statutory minimum wage regime to provide a wage floor which forestals excessively low wages without unduly jeopardizing Hong Kong's labor market flexibility, economic growth, and competitiveness, and minimizing the loss of low-paid jobs. Under the MWO, the Minimum Wage Commission MWC, when required by the Chief Executive to do so, makes its recommendation on the SMW rate to see in Council at least once in every 2 years. MWC adopts an evidence-based approach in reviewing the SMW rate. Apart from making reference to and analyzing statistical data and information, it also conducts extensive and in-depth consultation with the community, including organizations representative of employers and employees, on the review of the SMW rate, and considers other factors that are pertinent to the review but that cannot be fully quantified. The 4 main areas analyzed and considered by MWC when reviewing the SMW rate include 1, an array of indicators, AOIs, 2, views from members of the public and stakeholders, 3, other relevant considerations, and 4, impact assessment. Since the implementation of SMW in May 2011, and after 4 upratings, the employment earnings of grassroots employees have improved continuously. In between June and August 2022, the average monthly nominal employment earnings of full-time employees of the lowest decile group, after excluding government employees and living domestic workers to whom SMW does not apply, have risen cumulatively by 78.8% compared with the pre-SMW period, translating into an increase of 29.6% in real terms after discounting inflation. As regards to questions raised by the member, my reply is as follows. 1 and 2. As announced in the Sea's policy address delivered last month, the government will invite MWC to study and submit proposals to the government on issues such as enhancing the mechanism of SMW rate, the review cycle, improvement to efficiency, and the balance between minimum wage levels and economic development. The government will invite the Commission to formulate a work plan and timetable, explore different options, and publish relevant information in due course. As stipulated in the MWO, One of the major functions of SMW is to provide a wage floor, which forestals excessively low wages. At the same time, the SMW rate also needs to ensure that Hong Kong's labor market flexibility, economic growth, and competitiveness will not be unduly jeopardized and minimize the loss of low-paid jobs. Apart from SMW, the government has implemented other targeted measures, including the Comprehensive Social Security Assistance Scheme, CSSA, and the Working Family Allowance Scheme, etc., to improve the subsidies for grassroots families and low-paid employees or the incomes of them. 3. MWC is tasked to make recommendations on the SMW rate. As mentioned above, in discharging its function, the Commission analyses comprehensively relevant data information of the socioeconomic and employment conditions and monitors continuously these conditions after the implementation and upratings of SMW, including the impact of SMW on enterprises and inflation, as well as employees and the global labor market. MWC also analyzes the socio-economic characteristics such as the gender, age group, educational attainment, and occupational group of employees earning the SMW rate and their sectoral distribution. Under MWO, employees with disabilities are entitled to the same protection of SMW as able-bodied counterparts. MWO also provides a special arrangement for employees with disabilities to opt to undergo productivity assessment to determine whether they should be remunerated at no less than SMW or at a rate commensurate with their productivity. This strikes a balance between providing wage protection to employees with disabilities and safeguarding their employment opportunities. According to organizations in the disability and rehabilitation sector, most of the newly employed persons with disabilities are earning wages at or above the SMW rate. When conducting a new round of review on the SMW rate, MWC will consider if adjustment to the data covered by AOIs is needed. MWC will continue to fine-tune the review mechanism of the SMW rate in light of the operation experience. Mr. Kwok. In the latest policy address, there is a proposal to conduct a review of SMW because employees haven't enjoyed any pay rise under MWC for 4 years, but the result or the reply lacks respect for the issue because all the information in the reply can be found in past documents. Now, I'd like to know whether the review in future will be done annually. There is no reply, and whether they will include improvement to working poverty in the Commission's review. No answer, and so there is nothing in the reply. Everything will be left to the MWC to consider. This goes to show, Mr. Kwok, please come to your question. This is not a debate. Noted, Chair President. The community will wonder whether we have an executive-led government or MWC-led government. Now, my question is very simple. Since the policy address has promised a review of the SMW regime. However, there is nothing in the reply. Does that mean that this will pave the way for zero result arising from the review? Secretary, as mentioned, we're going to invite MWC to review issues related to the SMW regime, including the review cycle and how to improve efficiency. We propose this scope of review with sincerity. As we all know, the setting of SMW involves the labor as well as the employer sectors, the academia, and also different sectors of the communities. This employers and employees, academia, and also the government are all parties to the MWC. Any review of the SMW rate will need the engagement of different parties so they can seek common grounds and come up with a mechanism better than the current one. So this is a solemn pledge by the C in the policy address. Hopefully, when we have the next round of SMW rate review, we can have a system that best suit the needs of this community. Thank you. Mr. Wong Kwok-keung. Mr. Kingsley Wong. In the July 1st important speech of presidency, we asked to give a sense of happiness to everyone in Hong Kong, so that we believe that if we work laboriously, then we can all have happiness for the whole family, and we should share with the community the fruits of prosperity. But then 0.8 million of working poor in Hong Kong, many of the grassroots workers are working very hard and they can't make ends meet. They have to work for 10, 11 hours a day, or they have to receive subsidy under the government's Working Family Allowance scheme. While they work hard, they're not able to improve the quality of life of their families. The SMW regime is to lay down floor wages. How can it live up to the expectations of presidency, and how can we ensure that employees, after working for 8 hours, can live a dignified life with sufficient protection, and that they can share the fruits of prosperity? How can we ensure that the review can achieve this? Because in the past, the review only caught up with inflation. Secretary, in this review of the SMW regime and also our future labor policy, we bear closely in mind the 4 expectations of presidency for Hong Kong. And it's exactly because of this that the chief executive has invited the MWC to review the mechanism of the SMW, including the review cycle and how to improve efficiency. But let me say that the purpose of SMW is to prevent excessively low wages without jeopardizing our labor market flexibility, economic growth, and competitiveness, and minimize the loss of low-paid jobs. We don't want to take away the employment opportunities of low-paid workers. As regards how we address poverty issues close to the hearts of many in Hong Kong, and how we can help our labor force. Now, this is an issue separate from the SMW regime. We can't achieve so many objectives under the mechanism. So we have a working family income subsidy. We provide more job opportunities for everyone. We fully understand that the welfare of the labor force, in particular that of the low-income earners, cannot be taken care of simply by MWO. Our labor policy and the overall economic development of Hong Kong will have to play a part. Mr. Lee, the purpose of SMW is to improve the livelihood of grassroots employees. In fact, 0.6% of our workers are earning SMW. However, the SMW will increase the operating costs of enterprises, causing a domino effect. Adjusting SMW will worsen inflation, adding to the cost of living of everyone in Hong Kong. The government mentioned a number of subsidy measures. Will there be more targeted measures to help the working poor so that they can be given relief in terms of education of the children, etc.? They can be given relief. Secretary, first, the impact of SMW on inflation is minimum because there are a number of factors contributing to inflation. Now, under MWO, we want to provide a wage floor which forestals excessively low wages. As regards how we can address poverty issues and also assistance to the working poor, as I mentioned, we've got the Working Family Allowance scheme and also other measures. the CS4A has got the Teen for Tomorrow scheme to help people or children living in subdivided flats in particular. They are children of working parents with low wages. Now they care for their income as well as the future of their children. So that is a targeted scheme to help the working poor families, and that is the Strive and Rise program for children. Mr. Yu, thank you. The Labor and Welfare Bureau is willing to take a big stride forward under the review of the SMW regime. I welcome that because the mechanism has been often criticized. People don't know how the review is done, and there are disputes inside the Commission, and that cause uncertainty to our economy. I hope the review can take into account adopting a formula so that it can be objective, efficient, and transparent. In reviewing the SMW level, I'd like to ask the Secretary whether it will use inflation or consumer price index, etc., so that there can be objective factors for adjusting the SMW rate, so that we will not be subject to the subjective views of the SMW after negotiations. I said the MWC will be invited to conduct a review and advise us on the review cycle and how to improve efficiency. We cannot preempt the study by MWC, but the Commission will explore different options, including whether a formula can be adopted to make the whole process simple and efficient and expeditious. So after we have recommendations from the MWC, we will report to the Council in due course. Mr. Lam Chan Singh, the policy address promised invitation of the MWC to study how to enhance the review mechanism of the SMW. Under the ordinance, the MWC would only make recommendations to the Chief Executive on review of the SMW. When the Standard Working Hours Committee was set up in 2013, the LAB, Labor Advisory Board, became a member of the committee. So will the administration consider adding LAB to MWC, given that LAB has representatives from employers, employees, and the government? Secretary. Now, the MWO has made it very clear that the determination of SMW rate is to be done by MWC. It has the statutory duty to do so. So the Chief Executive has invited MWC to conduct that study and make recommendations to the government. I'm sure the MWC will consult widely, extensively, different sectors of the community. It will also, for sure, listen to the views of LAB if the latter has any. Mr. Dennis Leung, FTU is of the view that our SMW rate should be pegged to cost of living so that SMW can really protect our grassroots employees. Now, the rate of $40 per hour, that means the monthly wages should be $8,320. Secretary, can you tell us how $8,320 can take care of the various basic necessities of life by working 8 hours a day at SMW? And Secretary, can you do an experiment, see how you can live on $8,320 in the coming 6 months? Secretary, the purpose of SMW is to forestall excessively low wages. In reality, very few employees in Hong Kong are earning SMW. even if there are, they may be receiving other forms of government assistance, such as the working family allowance, and so not many employees are really earning SMW only. Mr. Chao Xiu-chong. Thank you, President. The Secretary has addressed a number of supplementary questions, and yet he is still silent on when the MWC will start its work and how long the review is going to take. Can we expect that by 2024 we can have annual reviews of SMW? Can we have a more definitive answer from the Secretary? We will invite the MWC as soon as possible to conduct a review covering issues mentioned by the CE in his policy address. As we all know, just in late October, MWC has submitted recommendations to the CE Council on the next level of SMW rate. So once the work is completed, we will invite MWC to start the review as soon as possible. We will invite MWC to formulate a work plan and timetable, and so we can make timely updates to members. Thank you.
Last question seeking an oral reply, Mr. Chan Han-pan. Mr. President, at present, it's learned that since the outbreak of the COVID-19 epidemic, camping has been a holiday leisure activity for many members of the public. However, campsites under the government have not been reopened after being closed for more than 2 years, and private campsites are limited in number. As a result, many camping enthusiasts have to go camping in non-country park sites or even engage in illegal camping within country parks. In this connection, will the government inform this council, 1, of the quarterly numbers of warnings issued and prosecutions instituted in each of the past 5 years and since January this year by the Agriculture, Fisheries and Conservation Department, AFCD, with regard to illegal camping? 2, given that while the social distancing measures for catering premises, beaches, bars and certain places of entertainment have been relaxed, the campsites under the government remain closed, of the reasons for that, including whether camping has been assessed as posing a high risk of spreading the epidemic, and whether it has a timetable for reopening such campsites, if so, the details, if not, the reasons for that, and 3, whether in the past 5 years the government conducted studies on developing new campsites, including sites for glamping and car camping, and enhance facilities in existing campsites. Secretary for Environment and Ecology. Mr. President, at present, there are 41 designated campsites in country parks in Hong Kong managed by the AFCD. The Leisure and Cultural Services Department, LCSD, also manages the Pui O campsite on Lantau Island. In light of the COVID-19 epidemic situation, under the government's overall anti-epidemic measures, these campsites remain closed for the time being. Having consulted the Health Bureau and LCSD, my consolidated reply to the 3 parts of the question raised by Mr. Ben Chan is as follows. 1. According to the Country Parks and Special Areas Regulations Cap 208A, no person shall camp or erect tent outside designated campsites in country parks and special areas. The AFCD staff would take appropriate enforcement action against any illegal camping activity found in country parks during patrol. During 2017 to 2021, the AFCD issued a total of 353 warnings against illegal camping activities and initiated 266 prosecutions. During the first 3 quarters of this year, the warning and prosecution figures were 146 and 182 respectively. The detailed figures of warning and prosecution against illegal camping made by AFCD in each quarter during the past 5 years and the first 3 quarters in 2022 are also set out at the annex. Part 2, under the principles of science-based and targeted anti-epidemic measures, as well as proper management of risk and citizen-focused facilitation, the government implements risk-based management by differentiating people into different risk levels with scientific precision. On the premise of emphasizing management, the government strives to allow the maximum degree of daily activities and participants involved with a view to striking a balance between risks and economic impetus. Considering the above, while the epidemic situation in Hong Kong remains relatively stable, and numbers of severe cases and deaths have not recorded a marked increase amid the emergence of new mutant strains, the government has recently relaxed a series of social distancing measures, including reopening of barbecue sites managed by the government, including barbecue sites within country parks under the AFCD from the 3rd of November. The government emphasizes that we must adopt a prudent and orderly approach in relaxing various anti-epidemic measures so as to avoid a rebound in the epidemic situation and backtracking along the path to normalcy. The government will continue to closely monitor the epidemic situation as well as review and adjust social distancing measures, including the closure of campsites in country parks, with a view to allowing more extensive daily activities with more participants on the premise of safeguarding public health so as to allow citizens' livelihood to resume normalcy in an orderly manner. Part 3. The AFCD is committed to enhancing the recreational and ancillary facilities in country parks. In this regard, the AFCD regularly reviews the utilization of campsites in country parks and make timely improvement to the campsite facilities on the basis of the needs of country park visitors and the actual situation of the locations concerned, with a view to meeting the public's growing demand for countryside recreational activities. Campsite improvement works in the past 5 years include 1. Expansion of Chung Pui campsite located in Pak Sin Lang Country Park and Sai Kung Wong Shack campsite located in Sai Kung East Country Park in 2017 and 2021 respectively. 2. Provision of new camping platforms at Nam Shan campsite located in Lantau South Country Park and Shekpik campsite located in Lantau South Country Park in 2020, as well as at Lantau Ngongping campsite located in Lantau South Country Park in 2022 respectively. And 3. Replacing the dry toilet pits with solar-powered toilets at Tung Lung Chau campsite located in the Tung Lung Chau Fortress Special Area, Mang On Shan Ngongping Lam campsite located at Mang On Shan Country Park, and Lau Shui Han campsite located in Pak Sin Lang Country Park in 2021 and 2022 to improve ventilation and lighting of the facilities. In addition, the AFCD is preparing to introduce an advanced booking system pilot scheme at Twisk campsite located in Tai Lam Country Park by setting up a computer system for the campsite to facilitate campers to book camping units and facilities online. At the same time, facilities such as camping platforms, benches, barbecue kits will be improved to enhance camping experience. The AFCD will collect public opinion through the pilot scheme for the purpose of reviewing the implementation of the pilot and also make adjustments to the campsite operation and facilities, as well as the booking system according to the actual situation. The government announced in the 2021 budget that $500 million would be earmarked for carrying out various enhancement works on the facilities in some of the country parks. The AFCD will commission a consultancy study within this year on the feasibility of setting up glamping facilities in country parks with a view to determining the site locations, design, mode of operation, fee level, operation requirements, etc. The consultant will carry out detailed studies at potential sites, including Tai Tong, Yuen Long, Tai Mong Chai Sai Kung, and Rotary Park Tai Mo Shan, and will take into consideration the geographical setting and other ancillary facilities of these sites so as to ensure that the operation of the relevant facilities will not pose long-term adverse impact on the environment or exceed the carrying capacity of the country parks. The enhancement works for the facilities will be implemented in stages in accordance with the outcome and recommendations of the study. The AFCD will also conduct public engagement activities to collect views from the public and relevant stakeholders during the course of the study. As regards the Pui O campsite managed by the LCSD will carry out enhancement works to strengthen the lighting system of the campsite in late November this year. In addition, the lighting system will be powered by solar energy to enhance the protection to the environment. Moreover, the refurbishment works on the toilet block adjacent to Pui O campsite were completed in April last year. Universal toilet, baby care room, and family-friendly facility have been added to further enhance the sanitary facility and bring convenience to campsite users. Mr. Ban Chan. Mr. President, well, I understand that there's been an increase of prosecution against illegal camping year on year. That means people are anxious about the closure of campsites for over 2 years because of COVID-19. They cannot wait any longer. For higher risk activities such as activities at the beaches, barbecue pits, the government is gradually allowing such activities to take place, including Hong Kong Sevens, and it is entirely unreasonable for campsites to remain closed. According to the Secretary, they need to strike a balance between risk and economic impetus. Now, does it mean that the camping or outdoor experience doesn't bring any economic benefits? Otherwise, what exactly are the criteria for considering the closure or reopening of campsites? Would you promise to take another review in the near future to reopen the campsites? Secretary, as I said in my main reply, the government acts in accordance with the principles of science-based, targeted anti-epidemic measures, as well as proper management of risk and citizen-focused facilitation in considering the relaxation of social distancing measures. We also consider some factors, as set out in my reply, that is, will place emphasis on allowing the maximum degree of daily activities and the participants involved. And we also need to strike a balance between risk and economic impetus. So for activities with more participants, which may bring an impetus to our economy, we will give priority to relaxing measures targeting these activities. However, I must stress that the local epidemic situation is not in a state in which we can relax all control. Of course, we understand the aspiration to relax these measures as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, we need to act with prudence and we need to guard against a rebound in the epidemic situation. We should avoid backtracking along the path to normalcy. That means we don't want to tighten the social distancing measures again after we've relaxed the measures and found a rebound. So in such circumstances, we need to take small and gradual steps in relaxing social distancing measures. And then we will keep in view the actual situation. And when circumstances permit, we'll take steady steps to further relax the rules. So as you can see, for barbecue sites within country parks under AFCD, the government has allowed the reopening of sites, barbecue sites. And on campsites, the government will also consider the matter comprehensively, and we also would like to reopen the campsites as quickly as possible after having regard to the epidemic situation. Mr. Tony Chair. Thank you, Mr. President. In the Secretary's main reply, he points out that there are 41 designated campsites in country parks in Hong Kong. And then it's been 2 years since these campsites have been closed in July 2020. Now, in relation to illegal camping activities within the country park, the AFCD would initiate prosecution, and he also includes some figures in his reply. My question for the Secretary is this, Mr. President. Now, after you've closed campsites in the country parks, people continue to engage in camping activities, only that the activities would take place elsewhere, including on private land lots. Now, my question is this. In relation to camping activities that take place on private land, in other areas other than the country park, does the Secretary know what form of control the government has on these activities? We have only one SAR government, so I'd like the Secretary not to tell me that it's none of his business. Mr. President, in relation to camping activities outside country parks, government departments would act in accordance with the actual situation and enforce the relevant regulations with the power delegated by the relevant regulations to the departments. One example is the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department. The department is very concerned about the illegal disposal of waste in the countryside and other illegal activities. So for litter bugs, the department will issue a $1,500 fixed penalty ticket against these offenders. For more popular places with bigger crowds, such as Tap Mun, and on weekends where there tend to be more camping activities, the FEHT will deploy more manpower to pick up refuse and to place large rubbish bins for waste management and to take enforcement action to protect the environment. I'd like to remind the public that even if you carry out camping activities in areas outside the designated campsites, you are still required to follow CAP 599G, that is prevention control of disease, group of gathering rule, that is you should not form a group of more than 12 in any public place. And signage will also be put up to remind members of the public to follow the anti-epidemic rule. Mr. Yim Kong. Thank you, Mr. President. After closing the campsites because of COVID-19 for more than 2 years, many private campsites have emerged. According to recent media reports, there have been illegal private campsite developments. Some even are built on the coastal protection area. At some of the private campsites, the development is actually illegal, and there is an issue with inadequate insurance taken out to protect campers. Now, if campsites development take place in conservation areas, it would affect the environment as well. What does the government do to strike a balance between facilitating private development and protecting the nature? Mr. President, for private campsites outside the country parks, regard will have to be made to whether the facilities are temporary or permanent. If fixture is involved, it is possible that it will come under the regulation of CAP 349, that is the Guest House and Accommodation Ordinance. And in such circumstances, the operator will need to apply for a hotel or guest house license with the licensing office of the Home Affairs Department to make sure the facility complies with the relevant fire services requirements, so on and so forth, to ensure safety of the campers. So if there is suspicion that a license is required for a certain campsite, one should report to the licensing office, and the office will take inspection and enforcement action. If you breach the ordinance, as I mentioned, the maximum penalty is one of $500,000 and an imprisonment term of 3 years. As far as urban planning is concerned, we have different outline zoning plans setting out the permitted use in different zones, such as the coastal protection area and the conservation area. Town planning permission is required to carry out certain activities, including camping activities. Illegal development will be subject to control and enforcement action in accordance with the Town Planning Ordinance. And offenders, on first conviction, may be fined up to $500,000. And after the lapse of the statutory notice, those not complying with the order may be fined $50,000 a day, and on subsequent offense, $1 million fine and daily fine of $100,000. As far as land rights are concerned, the Lands Department will also act in accordance with the land grant and take enforcement action for any breach of the land grant. For example, a rectification notice can be issued against the offender. Otherwise, the case can also be referred to the lands registry to impose encumbrances. And in the worst scenario, can take possession of the land involved. Mr. Holden Chow. Mr. President, in the main reply, it is said that in the 2021 budget, $500 million would be earmarked for carrying out improvement works and setting up glamping facilities in country parks. And there will also be a consultancy study on the capacity of campsites in the country parks. Although the campsites have been closed for 2 years, we can speed up the study to enhance the capacity of the country parks. For example, if you find that the capacity has been reached for certain parks, you can impose a certain measure to strike a balance. I'd like to know the progress of the study, please. Secretary. Mr. President, I thank member for the question. We follow up on this initiative on a number of fronts. For example, for new facilities, we look into how we can enhance the recreational and education element of country parks. In 2017, we commissioned a consultancy study, and then in 2021, we consulted the panel on environmental affairs of the Legislative Council on the 4 recommendations of the study, including the setting up of an education center and treetop adventure and glamping sites, conservation tours, etc. We have not relaxed our effort. Preparation is underway. Once the epidemic subsides, we will take forward these projects. The member also asked about the carrying capacity of country parks. The AFCD would conduct a detailed feasibility study of a particular site to make sure that the facility will not bring in too many visitors in exceedance of the carrying capacity of the country parks. In other words, we can designate the maximum number of visitors allowed in the future, and there will also be other facilities available within the country park to divert tourists. So the AFCD considers the capacity issue in the design of new facilities, and we also have management measures.
Government Bill, first reading. International organizations, privileges and immunity